I've been meaning to do this video for a very long time, and by long time I mean I still have it written down on my old notepad that I used to use before I filled it up. I figure now's a good time, so here we go. Top 5 shows that everybody, okay, maybe not everybody, but most people like and I don't. So before I begin, I should mention I don't hate any of these shows, with the exception of one and maybe number 2, but we'll get to that. I just, in some cases, don't get why they're so popular. I don't get why they're so hyped up. Maybe it was something that I couldn't identify with, or somehow the show couldn't reach me, or I may have just been frustrated with the show, which you'll see in a minute. But yeah, it's just, these are just shows that I never really liked. So let's dive right in, shall we? Number 5, Doug. So before I go on, I should mention that I've only seen the Nickelodeon Doug. I have never watched the Disney Doug. A lot of people say the Disney Doug is not as good as the Nickelodeon Doug. I wouldn't know because I never watched it. In fact, I was so disinterested in the show, I didn't even know Disney acquired it. So I'll only be going on the Nickelodeon Doug and not the Disney Doug. So, I've mentioned before that I don't like shows about school. I just don't find them interesting at all. And I think Doug kind of epitomizes everything I dislike about shows about school. Because when you do shows about school, it's never interesting. It's always the same kinds of things. It's like, how am I gonna get the girl to like me? Or, the dance is coming up. I gotta study for the test, but something's wacky and I can't do anything. It's too cliched and I just don't like it. Also, not a big fan of, like, whiny, awkward characters. Like, and Doug is kind of like that. Fiction should be escapist, in my opinion, and you have a show like this, you know, they aired it like in the afternoons on Nickelodeon, you know, when kids would come home from school. So I would come home from a long day of being awkward at school, and then am I going to watch a show about someone being awkward at school? No! Screw that! I want to watch Batman! After a long, hard day at school, I need to see some bad guys get punched. I do know a lot of people really like Doug. I actually don't know how many people out there like Doug. I know a lot of my actual friends really like Doug, but it just never did anything for me. Not a fan. Number 4, and oh boy, this one's not going to win me any friends, SpongeBob. By the way, not all of these are Nickelodeon shows, just in case anybody was wondering. So, SpongeBob. Oh boy. This is like one of the most popular shows ever, and I just don't get it. I mean, I have watched it often, and a lot of people keep saying, like, you know, the earlier episodes are better than the later episodes, or, you know, people seem to have their favorite season of SpongeBob that they really liked. I will say that I have watched episodes from various points in its lifetime, and at best, I think it's okay. At best. I don't know. This show, to me, just does not deserve the worldwide cultural phenomenon status that it's achieved, and wow, I just don't really get it. And this show has been on forever! Do you realize that the show premiered in 1999? It's been on the air for 17 years! How the hell does it keep going? Do you know how many better shows have come and gone within that lifetime? It's ridiculous. So yeah, SpongeBob at best, just okay. The rest of it's overrated. Number 3, and I am not apologizing for this one, Code Lyoko. Oh my god, Code Lyoko. So before, when I mentioned some shows just kind of frustrate the hell out of me, this is one of them. It's a shame, too, because I kind of wanted to like it. It seemed like a really interesting sci-fi adventure show for kids, and it had a very, very unique premise to it, but therein lies the problem, because it's so strange and so nonsensical that I just, it makes my head hurt. I've never seen the original French version, so I don't know if that's any better. But the version we got here in the United States, it was just a mess. And I don't know what they were thinking with the localization team, because the voice actors they got were just not appropriate at all. Because some of them sounded way too old for the characters. Like, for example, in episode 1, there was a character who had to have been like 8 years old or something like that, and she sounded like she was in her 20s. Plus, I remember a lot of the lip movements didn't really match the voices. I think there were some cultural boundaries that it didn't really translate well to an American release. And I know none of this is really the show's fault, but it's still kind of a problem. And once again, we have a show with no origin episode. Well, it did have an origin episode, but we didn't find out for a while. In fact, I watched the first episode of this when it premiered on, I think, Cartoon Network had it, and I was just completely confused about what was going on, or who we were fighting, or how we were supposed to stop them. And then suddenly they went into like a digital world. I'm like, what is going on in this show? While I'm at it, I might as well address something. When I talked about The Miraculous Ladybug in my top 5 worst shows of 2015 video, everybody told me that the show did indeed have an origin episode, because I was complaining how the show started out just kind of, hitting the ground running with the series, and they didn't really explain anything. But apparently the show does have an origin episode. At the end of the season. You can't do that! You have to establish your weird world. You can't just throw all this stuff at us and expect us to accept it. But you know what? When it comes to Miraculous Ladybug, I think I can forgive it a little, because that show's not that complicated. I mean, it left you with a lot of questions, but it was still pretty easy to follow. Code Lyoko, on the other hand, is weird as hell. And it wasn't until season 3 where we got some information as to what's going on. You can't do that! That's bad writing! Oh, and speaking of bad writing, the most infuriating thing about this show was the reset button. So, in case you're not familiar with the show, here's how things go. This computer virus named Xana shows up and takes over something, and in order to stop him, these kids have to go into this computer and do a thing that undoes what he did. And while he's infecting, some kind of electronic device or things, he's wreaking havoc across the town, and just damage everywhere. So when they finally stop him, when they finally remove his infection, they have this button that they push that resets the world. It literally resets the world and wipes out the memory of anybody else except for the main cast of characters. It is one of the most infuriating things I have ever seen in any show. So not only does it eliminate consequence from this show, it also ruins character development. Because I remember parts of the show where, there was this bully girl at their school, but, she would get into situations where, they'd be trapped in an elevator together while all this stuff was going on outside. And then it would be established that maybe she's not so bad after all. There was also their gym teacher who could have potentially been an ally in their, fight against this monstrous virus or whatever, and then, they hit the reset button and it's all undone. I do realize that a lot of people really like this show, probably more so than anything else that's going to be on this list, but you gotta admit, this is kind of bad, and, that's fine if you like it because it's bad. I mean, there's a lot of bad things I really like. I still acknowledge that they're bad, but gosh, the laziness, the hackneyed writing in this show is just, it's awful. So yeah, Code Lyoko. Just, it makes my head hurt. Number 2, Drawn Together. Oh god, here's where we start getting into the hate. This was a Comedy Central show from a couple years back, and it was a lot more successful than some of their other attempts at an animated series, except for South Park, obviously. But, God, it's just, I can't even look at it sometimes. The premise was, you have all these cartoon characters in this reality show situation, and that's actually a really good idea. And they had all different kinds of tropes. Like they had one who was a Disney princess, they had one who was like a Scooby-Doo parody, you had a superhero, you had a video game character, a Flash animation character, you know, etc., etc. And it could have worked. It really could have been interesting, but it's so painfully not funny. There were so many bad jokes in this show, and they were so relentless about how bad their jokes were. Like, they would try to do some kind of running gag in certain episodes, and it would just be... it would be maybe funny the first time, but they just kept going with it and going with it, and they just beat it into the ground until there was nothing left. It was also one of those shows that relied a lot on shock humor. It would go out of its way to be as edgy and offensive as possible in the hopes that somebody was laughing at it. Each of the characters were some horrible stereotype, like the Scooby-Doo girl was black, so they had to make all kinds of black jokes. The video game guy was gay, so they had to make all the gay jokes, you know. And what pains me about the show is there were so many great voice actors that were a part of this. Tara Strong, Cree Summer, Jess Harnell, James Arnold Taylor. They're some of the best. And their talents were wasted on this unfunny drivel. And what sucks is the idea of a cartoon reality show was a neat idea, and it could have been good, but it didn't work out here. Luckily, it worked out somewhere else, and we'll talk about that next time. So, that brings us to number 1. This was a show that I didn't start out hating, but it's one of those shows that sticks around so long you begin to hate it. Number 1 is Family Guy. And I know a lot of people nowadays don't like Family Guy, but you'd be surprised at how many people still really like Family Guy. I've heard from people that this was their favorite show. Like, really? Family Guy is your favorite show? Like, it doesn't get any better than Family Guy. Are you serious? And just like with SpongeBob, this show has been going on for a very long time. When it first premiered, I actually thought it was kind of funny, but then it was canceled, and honestly, I didn't even know it was canceled. But then it came back, and then it was canceled again, and then it came back. And it seems that every year that goes by, the show just keeps getting progressively worse and worse. The characters in this show have just degenerated into some of the worst ever. They're hateful, they're abusive, they have mental problems, and it's to the point where it's not even funny anymore. It's more like, these people need to seek some help. Not to mention the jokes have gone stale, they keep reusing ideas, you know, premises of episodes are offensive. It's long outstayed its welcome is what it is. It's sad because Family Guy can do good things. I like the episodes that focus on Stewie and Brian when they're on a road trip together, or the one where they were trapped in the bank vault. That was a really good episode. And then there was the murder mystery episode where they were all at the mansion, which, by the way, didn't have any cutaway gags, and maybe the show should just stop relying on those. I know it's very easy to pick on Family Guy, but it's garnered so much hate from so many different sources. The South Park crew hates it, the Simpsons crew hates it, even Seth MacFarlane said he was done with the show for a while. And you know what? I like Seth MacFarlane. I think he can be funny. I've seen him on the Comedy Central roast, but it's just, Family Guy is done as far as I'm concerned. It's not funny anymore. It's just on TV, and we're just kind of waiting for it to finally die. So yeah, I don't know what else I could possibly say about Family Guy that hasn't already been said before, other than the one thing that deserves to be repeated: Family Guy needs to go away. Forever. Well, that's my 5 shows that everybody, or at least most people, like, and I don't, so feel free to comment below, and if I insulted your favorite show, don't worry, you get the chance to yell back at me, because next time, I'm going to do the 5 shows that I like, but everyone else doesn't, so look out for that.